And hello YouTube, this is Thomas Judge back once again with another installment of my ongoing, almost completed series, Valiant Till the Last, in which I read the entirety of the Valiant Entertainment universe, every issue that's been released since the 2012 reboot, and we've now actually covered every single comic issue. In these last couple of videos, I'm just going to be doing a bit of housekeeping and tidying up a few things and throwing out a few things out there that hopefully people that have followed this much of the series will find interesting. So, with no further ado, what I want to talk about today are outstanding series, vaporware, the death of Valiant, and Valiant video games. So let's go straight into it. What are the series that are still ongoing in theory that I haven't read and haven't covered in the previous 74 videos? First up, we've got Archer and Armstrong Forever. Now, this is a series written by Steve Fox with art by Marcio Fiorito, and it follows Archer and Armstrong, obviously, after an event where Armstrong loses immortality. Now, I haven't read it. There are 4 issues that are out so far, and the series has now been cancelled. More on that later. Next up, we have Bloodshot Unleashed, which continues the Bloodshot thread of this universe. This is written by Denise Camp with art from John Davis Hunt, and it's basically about Bloodshot just doing the usual, being a badass, fighting other sort of living bioengineered weapons, and so on. The main noteworthy thing about this, other than what looks like pretty good cover art, is that this is the first series ever published by Valiant Entertainment to be giving an M content rating, which means M for mature, as opposed to the usual teenage plus rating. There are 4 issues of this that are out so far. Next up, we have Ninjak Super Killers, which is an upcoming miniseries, which follows directly on from the previous sort of 4 or 5 issue miniseries, which was Ninjak Volume 4. And it's basically Ninjak just fighting other assassins as per usual, written by Jeff Parker. None of these issues have been released, so who knows if we're ever going to see them. And the last ongoing is Exo Manowar Unconquered, which is written by Becky Cloonan and Michael Conrad, with art from Liam Sharp. And it's basically Exo in space, so like cosmic Exo fighting aliens and stuff. This was initially slated for a 2022 release, but the first issue actually came out in March this year in 2023, with a few more issues out since. I think there's 3 issues in total that are currently out. It's mid-story arc, and well, since then it may well no longer be published by Valiant. It may be getting published by Alien Books, but again, more on that in a second. So these are the 4 series that are Valiant's only current ongoing or semi-ongoing series, and I think this brings me to a couple of unenviable points. Valiant's publishing schedule has gone off a cliff. Here's an example of some vaporware that highlights that exact same thing. So vaporware is it's a video game term. It's basically a term used for video games that have been in development forever. In film or screenplay terms, I guess they call these things like development hell or things like that. I'm not quite sure what the comic book term is. I don't think there is one specific for the comic industry, although there should be, because here are a couple of examples of what I like to think of as Valiant vaporware. The first one is the series The Final Witness, which was a crime noir miniseries that was originally meant to be coming out in 2020. Obviously, COVID happened, so I understand that. But then in February 2021, the series basically got delisted, so it's not solicited anymore. It was meant to be written by Ray Fawkes, and it was meant to be a crime drama set within the Valiant universe, featuring a journalist, a detective, and a superhero, all chasing a serial killer, and set in San Francisco. It had potential, but that has now disappeared off the roadmap. Another example of Valiant Vaporware is Eternal Warrior Scorched Earth. Now, this was notably the company's first comic funded using Kickstarter, and I think it raised something like $60,000. Now, I'm always slightly wary when what should be a large self-sufficient publisher like Valiant starts using stuff like Kickstarter, and as a result, even though this got kickstarted and it was successful, and it was meant to be an OGN or original graphic novel about the Eternal Warrior, it has not been released and looks like it probably isn't going to be. And that brings us to the death of Valiant. Um, I've been doing this Valiant series for just over a year, and the main reason I've been doing it was to force me to read my Valiant comics, which I have done, and some of them have been amazing, some of them have been terrible. It's kind of spun out from that. I've done a whole reading order for the entirety of the Valiant universe beyond the hardcovers, going into trade paperbacks and uncollected editions. I've done custom binds and so on. But it's not lost on me that during the period of me doing this series, Valiant itself has hit some pretty major road bumps. So Valiant Entertainment started in 2012. That's when it relaunched after having sort of crumpled and burned and gone bankrupt in the early 2000s. And it was doing great until 2018 when it was purchased by DMG Entertainment, which essentially is an international media rights company that specializes in broad spectrum bullshit, from what I can tell, in the sense that they took over Valiant, took it away from Dinesh Shamdasani, who was the driving force behind the relaunch. And since then, they've been desperate to kind of diversify. They've talked about things like NFTs, video games, movies. Obviously, they had the Bloodshot movie and so on. It's essentially a company that bought Valiant with the hope that they could spin up their own MCU from it. And ironically, much like the purchase of original Valiant in the 90s by Acclaim Entertainment, this pivot to multi-channel cross-stream income generation, essentially the ownership of a company by people who didn't have comics as their core background, as their core emphasis, has unfortunately done Valiant a lot of damage. Over the last couple of years, even when I started this video series, it was clear that Valiant was reaching some pretty dicey publishing schedules. Things were getting delayed, things were getting cancelled. There were huge gaps between issues coming out. The publishing line was becoming increasingly inconsistent. And I think, functionally speaking, the best way to look at it is, as of this year, as of a couple of months ago, Valiant is essentially defunct as a comic publisher. So in June, Valiant announced that they'd entered a deal with the publisher Alien Books, which is an international book distribution company, for Alien to take over as publisher for Valiant Comics, and that would be starting with Exo Manowar Unconquered and the Ninjak Super Killer series. I'll be honest, I'm not enamored with where this is going. I think functionally Valiant is now dead in the water. I'm not going to dwell on it in a huge amount of detail. What I will say is that there's another YouTube channel out there called Comics by Perch. He's done some really interesting deep dives into Valiant over the last few months. I would recommend checking out those videos and those podcasts to get a feel of that. But unfortunately, we're in a pretty sad situation where it looks like Valiant is now functionally closing its doors. There's lots of inside gossip. There's lots of drama behind the scenes we could talk about. If you're interested, please check out those Perch videos. But from my point of view, it's a bit of a shame because it looks like Valiant is functionally defunct. The series we've just talked about, I'd be surprised if any more issue of those ever come out. I do have an Exo Manowar Deluxe Edition on pre-order from Amazon. It's the Dennis Hopeless series, which I wasn't a fan of, but hey, it's a deluxe edition. I'll buy it. And that's been on pre-order for well over a year. Keeps on getting delayed and delayed. I suspect it's not going to come out. So yeah, unfortunately, it feels like we are in the end times, the final days of Valiant, and it's a real shame. That said, there's a couple more videos that I'll be doing, which I'll talk about more right at the end of this video, so you know what's coming out, and some things that I think are quite interesting. So, with the modelling news out of the way, let's have a chat about the final thing I wanted to cover in this, which was Valiant-related video games. A few people have mentioned to me that Valiant have done video games, which I, of course, was already aware of. But now that I'm getting into retro video game emulation myself, I just thought it'd be useful doing a quick run-through of what the various Valiant video games are, if you're interested. The first one is from 1996 and it's Iron Man Exo Manowar in heavy metal. So this was published by Acclaim Entertainment and it came out for PlayStation, Sega Saturn, Game Boy, Game Gear, as you can see here, and even MS-DOS. And it's a two-player side-scrolling action game, well, one or two-player, that was basically criticised for being not very good. The next year, we saw Turok. So Turok Dinosaur Hunter was an FPS developed by Iguana, published by Acclaim, and coming out on Nintendo 64. Came out in 1997, and frankly, it had great positive reception. I personally really enjoyed this. This may well be the very first-person shooter I ever played in my life, and I remember being really stoked by it. Unfortunately, as the game went on, I remember getting quite disappointed with it. There was far too much platforming involved, and the dinosaurs were underwhelming. I think you fight one T-Rex right at the end of the game, and I don't know, it underwhelmed me. That said, a remastered version made by Night Dive Studios was released online digitally in 2018 for Xbox One, 2019 for Nintendo Switch, and 2021 for PS4. Next up is Turok Battle of the Bionosaurs. This also came out in 1997, a couple of months after Turok, and it's just a two-dimensional companion game to the N64 game, which is available on Game Boy. The next year saw Turok 2 Seeds of Evil coming out, another FPS game, again coming out on N64. The interesting thing about this is that it did use the N64 expansion pack, which was an optional thing but allowed higher resolution, better graphics. Again, it got very positive reviews, and again, it was remastered by Night Dive Studios and released for Xbox One, Nintendo Switch, and PS4. Interestingly, there's a different game with the exact same title set in the same fictional universe, which was released for the Game Boy Color, and that came out the exact same time as the N64 game. Next up, the next year, we had Shadow Man, again on N64. This also came out on PS1 and Dreamcast as well. I don't remember playing it. It's a third-person game, as I recall. And again, Night Dive Studios released Shadow Man Remastered, which had a whole bunch of sort of graphical improvements and some missing content. And again, that was PS4, Xbox One, and Nintendo Switch, all within 2022. Turok Rage Wars FPS came out again, N64, mainly a multiplayer focused game, and again using the N64 expansion pack. Haven't played it, don't know if it's any good or not. And again, it had a parallel game also called Turok Rage Wars that came out at the same time for the Game Boy Color. Armorines Project Swarm, or in Europe it was just called Armorines, is another FPS again for the N64 and the Game Boy Color and the PlayStation, and it came out in November '99. Armorines, by the way, isn't directly a series or part of the current Valiant rebooted universe. I kind of thought that's what Armorclads was going to be, but it wasn't. The next year we got Turok 3 Shadow Oblivion, again an FPS game, and again for the Nintendo 64, and again remastered by Night Dive Studios with the intention for them to be releasing that in November 2023 on Switch, PS4, PS5, X1, and X Series X. There's a separate game called Turok 3 Shadows of Oblivion, which was on Game Boy Color that came out at the same time. Following that was Shadow Man Second Coming, and second with a number 2 instead of an S for some reason. This is an action adventure game, and it was again by Acclaim Entertainment. It came out on PS2. I think it's been converted to a couple of other platforms, and it's a sequel to the N64 Shadow Man game. Literally a few months after that, Turok Evolution came out. So this was another FPS game. This was only on PS2, Xbox, and GameCube, though. And again, this came out in 2002. No remasters on the horizon as yet. The series then got kind of rebooted with Turok again in 2008. So this was an FPS game developed by Propaganda Games this time and published by Disney, ironically and weirdly enough. This came out on PS3 and Xbox 360 in February 2008. It's loosely based on Turok and the previous video games, even though it's a reboot of the previous video games. In it, you play the role of a Native American space marine, Joseph Turok, which is not a sentence you would ever normally expect to say. Anyway, he gets sent to an alien planet to apprehend like a rogue general. It's basically a bit of a Heart of Darkness, Spec Ops: The Line kind of riff, I guess. Anyway, so Turok crash lands. Of course, what other ways there to land in a video game? And then finds the planet's covered in dinosaurs, and he fights them all, as well as fighting General Kane's sort of rogue army. I haven't played it. I will check it out. I am interested. 2008 is kind of a sweet spot of video games for me, so I am definitely keen to check that out. And after that, there have been no Valiant video games. I'm quite surprised that DMG Entertainment haven't really milked anything else out from it. Having said that, I then discovered this, which is Battle of the Valiant Universe, which came out in 2018. It's a free-to-play mobile game with some microtransactions, obviously. I assume it's been pushed into existence by DMG Entertainment. It's available on Apple to iOS and Android to Google Play, and it's a real-time collectible card game, which I basically don't play with at all. It's got online and single-player elements, and essentially it just plays out like a card game. You deploy your cards that represent different characters in one of three lanes, and the aim of the game is to deploy better cards than your opponent. Not my sort of thing, but from what I gather, it's still available to purchase. So if you're interested, feel free to check it out. And finally, probably worth mentioning that a few months ago there was an announcement about a new Shadow Man game called Dark Legacy that was going to be coming out. I very much doubt that's ever going to happen. It's either going to be publicly cancelled or it's going to become vaporware and never be mentioned ever again. All right, well, that's all the video games made by Valiant Comics, or Valiant Entertainment, rather. Let me know what you think. Anything I've missed? Have you played any of these? Is there anything I should particularly prioritize in my retro game run through? Let me know. Um, we don't have any homework for next time, but there are a couple more videos in this series. The next video is going to be a surprise, which is going to be showing certain things about my collection a lot of people have been asking about. And then the final video for the series, which will be in 2 weeks' time, will be another surprise that I think a lot of people have been looking forward to. So hopefully, I'll see everyone then. All right, thanks for watching, everybody. As always, please like, comment, subscribe. As always, please follow me on Twitter at I am Thomas Judge, where I will post a daily review of whatever comics I've been reading. You can get an idea of what I'm up to on the channel. And as always, please support the channel by heading over to Amazon.com and checking out my prose novel about superheroes. It's a completely original piece of work. The first episode in it is called Arrivals, and the series as a whole is called No Gods or Kings. You can find an excerpt of that on my website, nogodsorkings.com. Until next time, everybody, stay classy.